Okay, welcome back to BIO100. So we are now in week 7, so you get to listen to me again, Dr. Gleason. You had me for week 6, you get to listen to me again for week 7. So what we're talking about in this week's module is how to read a scientific paper. So last week we talked about what is contained within a results section and what information you should include when you're writing a results section. And this week we're actually going to take a step back and look more holistically at what are the different parts of a scientific paper and how do you read the whole thing and interpret the different sections and that kind of thing. That's what we're focusing on this week. And so here, if we think about in general for BIO100, the student learning outcomes that we all should be learning and things we should be able to do by the end of the course. So this is, in general, what's listed on the syllabus. So at the end of the semester, you as a student should be able to read a scientific paper and explain the significance of the research. You should be able to summarize experimental methods, results, and conclusions of a peer-reviewed manuscript, and you should be able to produce and revise sections of a paper. So these are all general learning outcomes for the course that we're going to give you skills this week in this module to help you build up to be able to accomplish those learning outcomes. And those are the outcomes specific for the course in general. And then here again is our big BIO100 course concept map. So we can think about where we are in the course. So again, it all comes back to the scientific data in the middle. Last week we were here at week 6. This week we're here at week 7, where here we're focusing on reading about scientific data and reading the scientific literature. So we're going to give you the skills that you need in order to do that. And then here are some specific learning outcomes that are targeted specifically to week 7. So at the end of this module in week 7, we should all be able to identify the structure of a scientific paper. So we'll talk about what the different components are, what they each contain. We should be able to explain the types of information that are in each of those sections of a scientific paper. We've talked a little bit about the results section last week. We're going to talk about also the abstract, the methods, the discussion, all of that this week as well. We should be able to distinguish the main points of a scientific paper. And so we'll talk about how you're able to do that, strategies for doing that. We'll give you some practice with that. Next, we have using an effective strategy for reading scientific papers. And so the name of this module is reading the scientific literature. So by the end of this module, you should be able to have a really good foundation and a good strategy that will allow you to read scientific papers and extract the information that's within them. And in order to do that, part of your strategy is going to be asking questions of things that you're reading, drawing inferences, and taking notes as you read. So all of those 3 things we'll talk about more in the next video, so the main video for this module. We also want you to be able to compose or write a missing abstract for a scientific paper. So once we've gone through all of these different sections of the paper, you should then know what should be contained within an abstract. So the idea there is that if we give you a paper that's missing the abstract, you should be able to fill in that information from the rest of the paper. So that's going to be the assignment that you're working on after completing the online module and before coming to the in-class portion. You're going to bring that with you in class. And then we're also going to work on revising that abstract based on your peer feedback. So these 2 things are what we're going to work on in class this week. And then the first part here, we're going to focus on more in the online module in the upcoming video. And if you remember from last week, I made you do this last week as well. Before we get into the main details about the different parts of a scientific paper, first I want to activate your prior knowledge. And so, what I mean by that, your prior knowledge is anything that you already know about the topic. So, even though you haven't taken this course before, you probably know some bits of information about what's contained within a scientific paper. And the goal of activating that knowledge is to help give you context for this new information you're about to learn. And that context is really important because it helps give you connection. So instead of just having these random bits of information that you're now hearing, you're going to be able to connect it to things that you already know. And those connections are really going to help you move this information from your short-term to your long-term memory. And that's really the goal in any course that I'm teaching. Is I don't want you to just hear what I say and forget it and never think about it again, but I really want you to be able to store that information, remember it for a long time, and use it in future courses, use it in your future careers, what have you. So activating your prior knowledge is one of the ways that I can hopefully help you make those connections to move that information into your long-term memory. So go ahead and go back to Canvas. And just like last week, there's a prior knowledge quiz. So go ahead and go complete that now. Once you've done that, you can follow the rest of the instructions written out in that module, and you'll eventually get to the main video for this section. But thanks for watching the intro video. Now go do that prior knowledge quiz, and I'll see you back in a bit for that main video.